All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. I am Pix. Joining me is Little Crochet and Ninpo. And we're going to try to get started again super quick because we are now a little bit behind because of technical difficulties.
Hey, we had to make up time anyway. The estimate is correct.
All right. Well, Ninpo, you want to count us down?
Sure. All right, y'all ready?
Yep.
Give me a
Okay.
sec. I've got it loaded
sorry.
now. Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, ready for countdown?
Yep.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. So, welcome to Triangle Strategy, Square's HD 2D Tactics RPG. And we're going to start off with a bit of a JRPG classic. We're going to be squaring off against bandits, and we'll be introduced to 5 different characters. First up is Serenoa, our protagonist, the sword fighter, Roland, the horseman, Frederica, the mage, Gila, the healer, and Benedict, the tactician.
Yeah, this is the New Game Plus speedrun, so we are rolling our equipment from the previous game. The first thing you're going to notice is Frederica has an item called the Vanguard Scarf, which is going to let her move first. She's usually a very slow unit, but she's a very powerful magic user.
Yep, and another important thing is that we had to load the game from the golden route, because on the other routes, what happens at the end is that certain party members will actually leave, and when party members leave your party, then they actually lose their equipment, and we would have to spend time re-equipping them. So thus we need the golden route where nobody leaves your party and everyone is equipped and ready to go. So Frederica, equipped with the Vanguard Scarf, as you can see, is going to get the first turn on the fight, and she's going to open by using the Quietus, which are these one-turn use spells, and she's going to charge up her TP, also known as NP or mana in other games, to get a powerful Sunfall, and also use Fleet-Footed to give everyone extra movement. Sunfall is a very powerful, very big AoE nuke, but has the downside of having to need a turn to charge up. We can circumvent that, however, by using the in tandem Quietus with Benedict, and he's also going to give Serenoa a 2 full turn, which allows Serenoa to take 2 turns on his action. He's going to be showing off the Magic Stones, which are ranged AoE items that cost 0 TP and are an excellent source of damage on this difficulty. He's also going to be showing off a little AI manip there with his positioning. Normally, the upcoming bandit likes to attack Roland because he has the lower defense, but however, in this game, if you attack an enemy from the back, you get a guaranteed critical hit. And because he sees that he can get that crit and do more damage to Serenoa, he moves into that position, which allows Frederica to reach him and finish him off. The last thing to note is that you'll notice Roland here actually attacks twice on his actions, and that's because he has a passive called Opportune Attack, where if he moves at least 5 spaces, then he gets an extra attack. So that's going to be Chapter 1, and we'll be moving on to Chapter 2. An important thing to note is that in this transition between chapters, Roland actually temporarily leaves your party for some reason, even though he immediately rejoins after, which, as you remember, causes him to lose his equipment, and we're going to have to re-equip him in Chapter 2. Which is a little annoying, but if we're going to have to re-equip him anyway, then we can at least take advantage of that by actually giving him a different set of equipment than usual for Chapter 1 to get a slightly more optimal strategy. Now, for a little more context on Chapter 2, we are having a celebration between the 3 nations, Glenbrook, Hyzant, and Esfrost. We'll be having a joint mining operation as a sign of unification after the war 30 years ago, where the 3 nations were actually in war over resources, with salt coming from Hyzant and iron coming from Esfrost. Now, during the celebration, we're going to be having a little tournament for fun, just for fun, totally not for the nations to sort of size each other up and see how strong they are. And for this tournament, we'll be facing off against Hyzant, when the map will be having 2 bosses on a small arena map. we're going to be using 2 new characters. The first is Narv. All you need to know about him is that he is a secondary mage. The other more important character that we'll be using is Anna. Now, Anna is an assassin. She is a very useful and powerful unit for the speedrun. First off, she's really fast, which means that she gets to act early, and she also gets to act twice. And the ability to act twice that she has, she only gets to move once, but she gets 2 actions on her turn, which means that, for example, she can throw 2 items compared to the 1 that other characters usually can do, which effectively doubles her damage output. You also see that we have a few unskippable dialogue cutscenes. This is because there are certain dialogue options that you choose, and depending on which one you pick, they will raise different convictions, either utility, morality, or liberty. And this, on your first 2 playthroughs, influences your ability to recruit certain characters, or influence characters to vote certain ways that you'll see in the next chapter. But since this is a New Game Plus route and we have all our convictions maxed out, that won't really be relevant.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about grinding any of that stuff out, thankfully.
We've already gotten all the good characters and also all the bad characters.
So as you can see in this map, there's basically 2 groups of enemies. They're gathered up nicely in a little diamond formation. And so what we can do right now is, once again, take advantage of the Vanguard Scarf with Frederica, and she's going to get an immediate scorch off on the left group, and Narv is going to get to scorch the right group for tons of immediate chip damage. We also lock down that boss, Exham, with the Missed Opportunity Quietus, and by locking him down, we prevent him from taking an attack animation by attacking Frederica. And we also demonstrate why it's so important to kill enemies quickly before they get to take any turns, because since they're all dead, they don't get to take up time by moving or taking attacks.
Yeah,
all that's left is for Roland to finish off these bosses with his double thrust.
Using the Quietus takes a little extra time, but in the sum total, we get to skip Exham moving and attacking Frederica, and whenever you have 2 units on either side, you get a pincer attack. So because of the alignment, we also get that pincer attack animation too, so it all kind of adds up to make up the time to use the Quietus.
Yep. So, with the conclusion of the tournament, we are now met with the first route split of the game. Now, one of the main mechanics of this game is these route splits, where characters vote using the scales of conviction to choose which way the story will be going. And on this route split, we have the choice to either escort Hyzant or Esfrost back home and give our thanks. And for this, we're going to be choosing to go with Hyzant. And thankfully, Hyzant is actually the default vote, so we don't have to take the time to convince any of our allies. We can just skip right to the vote. So we go off to visit Hyzant, and we see that they are tutored for their equality, and we see it as a very, very happy place, at least on the surface. But something doesn't seem quite right. We're not quite sure what yet, but we'll be finding out in a timely fashion. Now, as we jump into Chapter 3, we're going to once again be making strong use of the Vanguard Scarf with Frederica, as normally the boss gets to go first, and because he gets the first turn, he gets to run away from our army, and normally you would have to chase him down to catch him. Since this is actually a kill boss map, we don't actually have to kill all of the enemies, only the boss. But because we're on New Game Plus, we have the Vanguard Scarf. What we can do is that we can take advantage of the Quietus and use Light Wave to warp Frederica up to the boss, like Pix is about to show us right here. And then we can one-shot him with the Blazing Chains attack, as he is an Ice Mage and thus has the elemental weakness to fire. And that's going to be Chapter 3.
Yeah, it's an additional 30%. Frederica can choose to spec into increased damage for Scorch, which is the AoE attack, or increased damage for Blazing Chains, which is the single target. So by speccing into the single target and the 30% additional fire damage for the weakness, that's enough to one-shot Plinius on this difficulty.
Yep. And then as you see there, when you first complete this chapter, you'll recruit a new character named Cornton. He's an ice mage. If you went to S-Frost, you would recruit the archer Rudolph. We already have both characters, but we still have to sit through that little dialogue anyway. And Cornton, he's usually a pretty good unit, especially on the higher difficulties, but on this difficulty and in the speedrun, we actually don't really have a need for his specific talents, so we won't really be seeing more of him. But I think he deserves a little break anyway for carrying the higher difficulties, so he can get a bit of rest.
Yeah, he's cold, Frederica.
Yeah.
Yep, even if it has access to a similar ability to Sunfall, which is Glacial Moon, it's a little bit weaker, but it does not have the charge up time. Unfortunately, there's only one Vanguard Scarf to go around, and he also has low speed like Frederica, and we don't have enough resources to patch that up, so Frederica's all we're really going to be using for that. So, moving into Chapter 4, we are going to be visiting our friend Dragan in the mines. He's running the mine operations. We're coming to say hello to him, give our thanks, and to see how the mining operations are going. But we are soon going to get ambushed, actually, and this is going to be the first more complex kill all enemies map. We're going to be seeing these 4 new characters. We have Huette, she's a flying archer, she's going to shoot a guy. And Piccoletta, she is another item thrower. She, unlike other characters, she can throw items farther than others and also do more damage with them. The last 2 units are a lot more interesting and far more important for the speedrun. The first is Medina. She's another item user, but a more supportive unit. She can, whenever she uses healing items, she can actually bestow upon them TP, and she can do this twice by using an ability called Double Items, which effectively means she can battery TP for up to 5 units, and that's going to be really important to keep uptime on our abilities. The other benefit of Double Items is that she can actually use it offensively, which we'll see in this map, and she can throw 2 stones instead, which basically allows her to replicate Anna. So Frederica is going to use the Vanguard Scarf once again to charge up Sunfall, Light Wave into this group of enemies, and charge up a Sunfall to wipe them all out. Anna, meanwhile, is going to work on this group of enemies, chipping them down with her 2 Firestones, and then we'll have Medina and Huette finish them off later. Benedict also has an ability called Now. It basically replicates the In Tandem Quietus. We have him use that ability because we need the In Tandem Quietus on this turn. This is Milo, the last new unit that we're deploying. Her main ability is Moon Jump right here, which allows her to jump across 5 spaces, especially over these hard-to-navigate areas like that gap. And she can go straight to that archer to attack him. And then hopefully this NPC unit, Dragan, will then finish him off with a Scorch. However, sometimes he just doesn't feel like cooperating and won't attack, which is really unfortunate when that happens.
Yeah, it's about a 15-second time loss if Dragan decides he doesn't want to live.
Yep, but looks like Pix was lucky with it. Let's hope that the same happens to Shay. And then lastly, we have Piccoletta and Serenoa finish off that group of enemies. Alright, it looks like they both got the good RNG, so no unfortunate Dragan shenanigans there. So after getting ambushed by S-Frost there, they're then going to move on to actually invade the Kingdom of Glumberg, which is where our party is currently residing. And thus, we need to get out of there. We need to escape, as Roland, our horseman, is actually the prince, and we want to make sure that he's okay. So this is going to be the first cheese map of the game. The objective of this map is actually to have Roland escape by reaching a certain area. And normally you have to slowly escort him there, but since this is New Game Plus, we have access to tools that on the first playthrough you wouldn't have access to. And all we really need to do is give him the 2 full turn buff with Benedict, and then we buff up his movement with Fleet-Footed and warp him over with the Light Wave Quietus. And then you'll be able to see he can reach the escape point no problem at all.
Yeah, 5 and 6 are 2 of the biggest cheese maps. 2 of the ones that get the most broken by New Game Plus.
Yep.
And 15 as well.
Yep, as we'll see later. But yep, we also see him use the ability Rush right there, which allows him to move 4 extra spaces through that barricade. And you also notice that Pix did something interesting. He used his mouse to control where Roland was moving. The mouse is an interesting control scheme. Normally, you would have to scroll your cursor over, but the mouse lets you directly select your target destination. And that sounds great and faster, and it is. And you might be wondering why we aren't using that more often. And the reason for that is, well, this game was very clearly not made for the PC. It was made for the Switch, actually, and then ported to PC. And because of that, the mouse's controls are actually really clunky, especially when you want to select a tile that is outside of the camera's range. So while it is technically optimal, it is not very convenient to use.
Yeah, it's really awkward if they're not on the camera, and also depending on how you have the camera turned, there's a lot of spaces. It also kind of lags a little bit. Like if you're trying to do troop selections on there, it kind of lags a little bit moving from one unit to the next. So it's a little clunky. There's a few places where we make use of it.
Yep. Now this next chapter, the objective of this chapter is to seize the target area. And what that means is that we need at least one of our allied units to be in the target area, and we need to eliminate all enemy units in that area. Now, how this chapter normally goes is that you're supposed to open the gate to reach that area, and when you open the gate, reinforcements will actually spawn. But if you warp through it with using something like Light Wave, then all you have to do is eliminate those 2 enemies like that, and the reinforcements never actually show up. So that's another quick clear.
Definitely not how they intended it.
Yep. Now, after we complete Chapter 6, this is sort of where the tutorial ends for the game and where the game really starts to pick up both story-wise and gameplay-wise, either in standard play or speedrun. We enter another branching path, as Frost has finished invading the capital and is now moving onto our domain, the Wolford domain, and we are given another branching path where we have to choose to either give in to their demands and surrender Roland, or we had to protect Roland from the invading mighty General Avlora. And we're going to choose to protect Roland, as we actually have a little trick up our sleeve that will make defending him much easier than you might think. In fact, so much so that narratively you would think that surrendering Roland would give you an easier time, but it actually gives you a way harder map if you choose to go that route.
Yeah, the other map you get has a very, very unfortunate height mismatch for you, and a lot of archers and a lot of terrain that can be set on fire, and is really hard to clear very quickly. The combination of this one, and then also, depending on what you choose for 7, affects what you get for 8. We also get a very fast 8 on this route for 7.
Yep. You'll see that we have to take the time to convince somebody for this to get this version of Chapter 7, but it is more than worth it. So the important thing to note about this chapter is that this is where more standard reinforcements start to show up. Reinforcements show up after you kill a certain amount of enemies, but what's important about them is if you were able to wipe out all the enemies on the map at once and just win, then the reinforcements won't show up, and you effectively skip those reinforcements. So this is where that little trick up our sleeve is going to come up into the play. The little trick up our sleeve is that we have some fire traps set out throughout the map. And any units, ally or enemy, that get caught in them when they get set off will be immediately wiped out from the map. So our main challenge for this map is going to be figuring out a way to trick all of the enemies to get baited into the traps and then set them off all at once so that they will all be eliminated on one turn. So we're going to be seeing a couple new units. We're going to be deploying, most importantly, a new unit named Quahog. Now, Quahog is basically a space and time mage. His most notable abilities that you'll see right now are the ability to warp allied units and the ability to swap with either ally or enemy units. And that second one is especially important because the boss, Avlora, doesn't really want to move, which means that that swapping ability is the only way that we can get her into the traps.
Yeah, Avlora is the only character whose AI is smart enough to realize the traps are there.
Yep.
So we have to give her something that she really wants, which is a free shot on a very squishy mage.
Yep. So after we warp Maxwell closer to the fire traps, we're going to have him do the only relevant combat in the map, which is going to be a critical hit high jump. And what that critical high jump is going to do is kill one enemy sword fighter. And we need to kill that guy because if we left him alive, there would actually be no more room left for him in the fire traps. And when we set the fire traps off, he'll still be alive and reinforcements will spawn. The other benefit to the high jump there is that you see it also advanced him 5 tiles, and it lets him move into that specific position, which is very important as it is how we can bait all the enemies to get there. We're also going to warp in Quahog so that he can swap places with Avora and function as the second shark bait. We're also going to have this new character Julio give TP to the other new character Giovanna, who's going to set off the fire traps. The reason that we have to put Maxwell into that specific position is this shield bearer right here. He has very low movement, and that position is the only way that we can bait him into that fire trap. Now, with all the enemies about to move into position, we have Giovanna move down and use the ability Gaia's Roar, which basically has infinite range in a cross shape, and it is able to trigger both traps, and there's the map. Quahog and Maxwell get caught too, but don't worry about them. They'll be okay. They'll be perfectly okay.
Yeah, there's no insta-death in this game, thankfully.
Yeah, so they will be right back with us, no problem at all in the next chapter.
Yeah, this was a really nice routing invention by Ninpo, who was one of the more recent members to join the community. It's just like this route has just continued to evolve so much because people bring fresh eyes to maps and give us new things to consider that we hadn't really thought of. And so now 7 is incredibly fast.
Yep, it's worth noting that that strategy is actually only available on the non-golden route, because if you want the golden route, you're actually not able to use those traps. So you have to do a slightly different, slower strat in order to wipe them all out. That strat we'll be seeing used later in the run.
Speaking of which, that was a gold 7. Let's go.
Very nice. So as we move into Chapter 8, we'll see the other benefit of choosing that version of Chapter 7, and that is that it allows for this branching path, which gives us the only version of Chapter 8 that is a kill boss map rather than kill all enemies map, which is good because, as you can guess, it's way faster to kill only one enemy instead of all of them.
Especially this particular enemy.
Yeah, this particular enemy, you can, depending on what choices you pick for your branching paths, you can fight him pretty often. No matter how many times you kill him, he just keeps coming back.
Incident doesn't also apply to him.
Even the final time that you kill him, he still doesn't die. He just runs away forever, never to be heard from again. So we are going to see that. So what happens in this branching path is that after that invasion from Esfrost, we receive a proposal to get aid from the Tellior domain. But the thing about the Tellior domain is that they are kind of sketchy, and we see right through that, and we say, no, we don't want any of that, and they are not very happy. So they send this mercenary named Rufus after us, and we need to defend ourselves from him. But we see that he is kind of a joke, as we are going to warp Frederica straight to him with the Lightweight Flightus, and wear him down with the Blazing Chains attack once again.
He's such a good mercenary that he doesn't even try to hit you, he just yells at you.
Yep, even though he could just bonk the squishy Frederica right there, he just doesn't really do anything. He just walks forward one space and that's it. And lets him get finished off by Frederica just like that. So, while we were able to defend ourselves from Tellior, we still haven't received any aid, which kind of sucks. But thankfully, Hyzant is going to come through for us, and one of the Saintly 7 of Hyzant is going to offer us a lot of money and resources for us, which we are very thankful for. However, as we all know, nothing in life is free, and he wants us to do some shady business for us. because he is actually smuggling salt to get some extra profits for his own pockets. And we are met with another branching path where we can either go along with it, or we're going to instead turn on him and turn him into the rest of the Saintly Seven. And for this, we're actually going to choose to turn him in, even though gathering the evidence, even though we don't really have much evidence to convince the others of that. This is also another default vote, which is great, so we don't have to waste any time convincing anybody.
Yeah, we're very bravely going to tattle.
Now, this upcoming version of Chapter 9 is actually really tricky on a first playthrough, especially. It takes place in a valley, and you actually start at the very bottom, which means you have the low ground, and you are completely surrounded by enemies on high ground, which normally means that they get to just start bullying you with arrows from their archers. But we're on New Game Plus, and we can actually use that low ground to our advantage by using a character known as Decibel. Decibel, if you are familiar with the Final Fantasy Tactics games, is basically the calculator class. What that means is that he has abilities that have massive amounts of range, but the catch is that it can only hit enemies if they fulfill certain conditions. They either have to have HP that is divisible by 3, 4, 5, or end in 7, or in the case of this map, they have to be at least 5 units above Decibel. And since we're on the low ground, that's going to be basically everyone in reach. He does have a few other weaknesses. For one, he is pretty slow, so we have to use abilities like In Tandem to accelerate his turn, so we don't have to sit through enemy turns. And he also is the only character in the game that does not naturally regenerate TP. So we need to deploy both Medina and Julio in order to keep uptime on his abilities. As you can see here in that little battle preview, you saw that there's pretty high ground up there, but we're going to be way lower. So Frederica is going to start us off by chipping down the boss significantly with a Blazing Chains to put him in range of Decibel's follow-up attacks. And you're also going to see Medina use another new ability called Fast Acting Medication after Quahog brings this archer into range of Decibel, because while his attacks have a lot of range, it's not infinite, and we do need to bring some enemies closer. Now, Medina's ability, Fast Acting Medication, is basically the same as the In Tandem Quietus and Benedict's Now ability. It accelerates the turn so that we can have Decibel immediately use that ability and hit almost everyone on the map. Once we have Julio use In Tandem on Decibel and feed him more TP to do it again, we can watch all of the enemies just suddenly disappear, or at least most of them. There are a few enemies that were just outside of range of Decibel's attack, and we're going to have to finish them off with Serenoa and Frederica. Quahog's positioning also is doubly effective because not only did it bring an enemy closer to put in Decibel's range, but it also baits these enemies to line up nicely for Frederica to finish them off with the Pillars of Fire ability, which hits in a horizontal line. Now, it's worth noting that if you were lucky, you saw that Archer attacked Quahog and it triggered some dialogue from Serenoa. But if you're lucky, that Archer will actually just move and not attack at all, and it's a nice time save as you don't have to watch that dialogue happen. It doesn't happen very often, but if you're lucky, it's very nice.
Yeah, I saw Shay get that RNG like very recently, and I don't think I had ever seen it before. And I thought she was making it up.
Yep.
Yeah, she got like
very rare.
she got like all the good RNG in that run. It was very surprising to see. So now that we have reached Hyzant, we are now in a phase where we have to try to gather enough evidence to convince the others of Sorceless's guilt. This opens up another route split, where you either get enough evidence to prove Sorceless's guilt, or you don't, and you have to face a trial instead. We choose to take the route that does not it does not sufficiently get evidence to prove Sorceless's guilt. But it's worth noting that this route split is actually not trivial, because while this does give us a faster map, it also gives us a lot of text boxes that we have to sit through, as that trial is pretty long. And the other route split, the map is longer, but it isn't that much longer. And in fact, to this day, it is something that we are still investigating. Yep, as you can see, you have to convince every other member of the Saintly Seven of Sorcerer's Guild. We just mash through and try to get through it as fast as possible, but as you can see, it was a lot of time spent sitting through dialogue. However, our reward for that is this pretty small map. It only has a few enemies, and we can take care of them pretty quickly. We're going to bring back Giovanna and have Frederica and Sereno take care of the rest of the enemies, while Giovanna will finish them off.
Yeah, I mean, you can go through and like even prove Sorceless's guilt. The route splits where you like prove it like 90% of the way, but you like prove him guilty and you still wind up in trial by combat anyway.
Yeah, the only difference is that if you successfully convince them all, they just give you an item. And not even a very good one.
Yeah. It's just gonna clog up our inventory.
Yep.
So we don't want it.
Yeah, that map has a lot of spikes we saw on the side, and so it gives you an item to prevent you from getting knocked back into them, but we kill the enemies before that becomes too much of an issue.
Yep. And there's Giovanna finishing off the rest of the enemies. Shay actually ended up using one of the newer strats. Pix used the older one that used Missed Opportunity to skip the boss Sorceless's turn, but Shay used the newer version where Serenoa just immediately kills him with a critical hit. So after that trial by combat, Sorceless is gone, and now there's a seat open in the Saintly Seven, and they actually put Serenoa in there, which seems good, but what that really means is that now they can try to peer pressure Serenoa into obeying them. But before we go into that, we're actually going to use that position of power to see what exactly is the truth behind Hyzant. And it turns out it's really not pretty. We go into an exploration phase, and we will briefly enter the source, which is where Hyzant harvests all of its salt. And what we find out is that Frederica's people, known as the Roselle, are actually being held in slavery in order to harvest the salt for them. And that's not very good. And what's even worse is that now Hyzant is going to demand that we turn in the Roselle residing in our domain over to them, as there are some that are residing in our domain thanks to our father. But we're obviously like, the heck, bro, no, we're not going to do that. And we choose to protect them.
Yeah. It's the right thing to do, and coincidentally, it's faster.
Yep, because the most notable thing about this chapter is that, about this route split, is that it actually causes chapter 12 to not be a combat map, but instead just be a brief exploration instead. So that means that this is, once again, another ironic case where, story-wise, you would think that turning over the Roselle would give you an easier map, but it turns out not only did you just sell out the Roselle completely, but you also just made your life harder. So this upcoming map is another map with reinforcements, and they are especially difficult to skip because once you kill 5 enemies, they'll spawn, and they're all pretty spread out, so it's pretty difficult to do. And for the longest time, the speedrun actually did fight them, until very recently. And we managed to kill them all by, once again, taking advantage of Decimal. But the tricky thing is that we need to use his ability that targets enemies that have HP divisible by 3. So our main challenge here is to, not only do we need to chip all the enemies into range to die to Decimal's attack, but we have to chip every single one of them to specifically have HP that is divisible by 3, which is not easy. We start off by doing something pretty unusual. We have Frederica use Sunfall, but only with 3 TP instead of 5, and that's because Sunfall actually does more damage depending on more TP you have. And when it only has 3 TP, it leaves all the enemies that she's about to target alive, because we're trying to avoid killing enemies so reinforcements don't spawn. And thankfully it also leaves a few of the enemies with HP divisible by 3. And is going to be warping over down there to start working on those groups of enemies. Now, of course, since we're mostly using AoE attacks to chip all the enemies, it's inevitable that some enemies will end up dying due to the collateral, but that's just something that you have to deal with as we try to precisely wear everyone down. It's a very, very tight and specific and precise map clear.
Yeah, it's the most interesting thing about, we very recently rerouted some of the accessories for different characters, including Archibald, and making sure everybody landed on an even multiple of 3 was an important thing to check for. It actually matters where you move Archibald on this map because he does different inescapable arrow damage at different spaces. So we found a different spot to move him to get the damage output we needed.
Yep, and also there's Piccoletta's ability to throw items farther than other characters comes into play, as she's able to just barely reach that group of enemies. You also saw an NPC unit who moved closer and triggered a conversation with Frederica on Pix's stream. That is another bit of RNG, where sometimes, depending on where he moves, he will trigger that conversation or he won't.
Yeah, we try to move characters into that particular space around Frederica to not trigger it, but it doesn't always work.
Yep, that's going to be Chapter 11, easily my favorite chapter of the speedrun. And here we get to enter Chapter 12, where as you can see, it's mostly just going to be all story cutscenes and no combat needed. So a very easy decision on which version of Chapter 11 we want to go to. Now, as we move into Chapter 13, we now have access to a new powerful advanced weaponry from Hyzant. It is an explosive called Alfric. And our next route split is going to be deciding how exactly we want to use that Alfric to reclaim Gunbrook. And we are going to choose Benedict's option, which is to destroy the dam, flood the city, and flood out all the soldiers. Which sounds pretty messed up, and it is, but hey, you know, it seems to be the first time that the questionable thing seems to finally give us the easiest maps, so I guess there's finally some consistency. Yeah.
Damn it.
So the reason that we choose this route is that the other 2 routes, they have 1 kill all enemies map and then 1 kill boss map. But this route actually replaces the kill all enemies map with instead a seize the area map, which, as you remember, all we have to do is get one allied unit into that area and make sure that there are no enemies there. It's also another default vote, which is great because we don't have to take the time to convince anybody.
And it is, in my opinion, the biggest cheese map.
Yep. Yeah. This, just like Chapter 5, they were both among the first maps that were ever cheesed when the game first came out. I'm actually not even sure which one was cheesed first. They were both skipped basically on like the first week. So the main reason that this cheese strategy works is that, unlike Chapter 6, there's actually only 1 enemy unit in the target area that we need to move. And if you remember, we have a certain character that has an ability to swap places with enemies, and that is indeed Quahog. So all we have to do is get him close enough, and then he can use that ability to swap places, which will both get rid of the only enemy unit that is in that area, and also place an allied unit in the area to seize it for ourselves. So we're going to have Benedict give him the twofold turn buff, the Fleet-Footed Quietus to increase movement, and the Light-Lived Quietus to warp him up there. It's also important that we sneak past this spotlight into that specific tile right there on Shay's stream, which will prevent the enemy scouts from detecting him and therefore not trigger reinforcements, which would be slow. We then move up to swap places with that enemy, and there we go, chapter 13. Now there is a small downside to doing this chapter, which is that the game goes, dude, you picked a pretty messed up option. You need to see the consequences of your action. So we're going to see another unskippable cutscene where you watch your own city getting flooded because of your actions. So, as you can see right there on Shay's screen, behold, the consequences of your actions. And now we can finally skip it. So now we are going to go and try to reclaim the capital, and we're going to be met with two bosses named Erica and Thalis, who are usually presented as pretty awful humans. They are especially awful to their half-sister Frederica, and even they go like, dude, what the heck? What did you just do? And we're going to say, none of your business, and we're going to take care of them real quickly. We are now going to be seeing the torch being passed from Frederica to Roland as the primary damage dealer, as he's going to be doing both of these boss kills. And this is also the reason that we had to do that re-equip on Chapter 2, so that Roland can reach the killing thresholds for these two bosses. You can see that after Frederica's chip on Erica, you can finish him off with the double thrust ability, and then he's going to actually be able to one-round Thalis completely using his ultimate attack for dragons, which is a very powerful attack that actually ignores enemy defense. And just like that, that is Chapter 14.
Yeah, we used to do that equip here in Chapter 14, but knowing what we know now about how Roland loses his equipment after one, and knowing, like, since we have to go into the menu anyway to swap in Narv onto that map, we go ahead and do the equip there since we're already in the screen. It's just a very small optimization.
Yep, and it allowed for a slightly more optimal Chapter 2 compared to the previous one. So now that we're moving into Chapter 15, we have another route split comes up, and this is the first special route split that is going to see certain party members leave our party temporarily because they each want to do different things. Benedict wants to go back home to visit your father, Lord Simon. Frederica wants to visit the Roselle village and check up on them because they heard that bandits were actually attacking them. And Roland wants to remain in the capital to investigate the corrupt nobles. And we are going to be staying with Roland. So that means Benedict and Frederica are going to be leaving our party, and that's part of the reason that the torch has passed from Frederica to Roland as our primary damage dealer. And the reason that we choose this route split is that Benedict's map is the only version of this Chapter 15 that is a kill all enemies map, and obviously that's a no-go. So the choice is between Frederica and Roland's kill boss maps. And you need to remember that while it is very nice to have kill boss maps, as you only have to kill one enemy, you also need to have a good boss killer in order to make those kill boss maps fast. And Roland is the best boss killer, and on the other maps you would lose Roland, so we want to take Roland's route so that we keep our best boss killer.
Yeah, and since Frederica has left our party, that also frees up the Vanguard Scarf for us. So we're going to see that move in this chapter.
Yeah, because that previous chapter was actually the last time that we will be deploying Frederica. So, but we still do want to take advantage of the Vanguard Scarf, as that is a very important item. So we'll be moving it to another character. In this case, it is going to be Quahog, that time and space mage. And since we're doing re-equips, we might as well do another re-equip here. We are going to be moving the movement bangle, an item that gives the character +1 movement, from Quahog to Milo, which she will be making use of in Chapter 19 for a small time save. So here's another kill boss map. The boss Patriot is a little bit far away, and he usually moves first, and he runs even farther away, which is why we need the Vanguard Scarf on Quahog. That allows him to immediately swap places with the boss to bring him close enough to Roland to finish him off. And the positioning that we use for this is very specific. We move him so that the boss is only 4 spaces away from Roland. And that's important because we actually do not want to trigger his Opportune Attack passive. We want to one-shot him with 4 dragons instead. This is important because Opportune Attack will do an attack but not kill him. And what that would do is trigger a dialogue between Patriot and Roland. And we don't want to deal with that because that would waste time. So we just want to go right to the 4 dragons, as we don't need the extra chip damage from Opportune Attack.
Yeah, sometimes we want it, sometimes we don't.
Moving into Chapter 16, we are reunited with Benedict and Frederica, and both of them bring news. Benedict comes back with information that you are actually the son of King Regna, giving you a legitimate claim to the throne. That information is not going to be relevant in the specific ending that we're going for, but it is relevant in other endings. Frederica is going to come back and reveal to the truth that, surprise, surprise, the Roselle, that Hyzant's religion is a lie, and the Roselle are being wrongfully oppressed. What a surprise. And she also comes with news that there may be something important in the mines that could completely strip Hyzant of its power, and we might want to get our hands on that. So we are going to be heading right back to the mines. So as we enter the mines, we're going to find out that Esfrost had already caught on to what was inside the mines, and they don't want us there. So they're actually going to be sacrificing their own lives in order to seal off the mines and prevent us from getting in. And we don't want that. So instead, we are going to have to stop them by wiping them all out before the bombs can go off. This upcoming chapter has a pretty notorious reputation for being really tedious due to the enemies all being really spread out and having multiple waves of reinforcements. And as you remember, we like to skip reinforcements by wiping all enemies out at once, but because the enemies are so spread out and you can't really kill that many enemies before the reinforcements show up, we are going to be using that strategy that I talked about back in Chapter 7. This is the Quahog and Izana combo that we will be employing. Izana has an ability called Rite of Thunderstorms. It is a charge-up ability like Sunfall that hits every enemy on the map, but at a catch. First off, it is not strong enough to one-shot most enemies, particularly enemies that have higher magic resistance. So we have to use the rest of our allies to chip everyone down to put them into range. The other downside is that this attack has really, really horrible accuracy. And in order to guarantee that it actually hits all of the enemies, we need to use Quahog's time spells this time, particularly the ability to stop time. This inflicts the stop condition on every single unit, allies included, and enemies that are stopped are guaranteed to be hit. So by using stop time to guarantee that we hit them, Izana is able to wipe out all the enemies all at once. The downside to this, of course, is that since everyone gets stopped, you have to sit through a lot of stop animations for both your allies and enemies. You see that also there are a few bombs placed throughout the mines. These are actually just a loss condition. If too much time passes before you defuse them, then you immediately lose the map. But thankfully, it's only a loss condition and not a win condition, so we don't have to spend any time defusing them.
Yeah,
you also see that Izana has to summon rain. She has to make it rain. That's because she has a passive ability that gives her extra lightning damage whenever it's raining. And that extra damage is important for beating the kill threshold.
There's also the enemy closest to Serenoa would live on 11 HP, so we also need to give Azana an item just to bump her magic attack just slightly.
Yep, you're going to be seeing Quahog use an enchanting spice to give her just a little bit more magic attack. You also see right here why we generally try to avoid using this combo. As you can see, we have to wait for all of these turns to pass before we can use the finisher.
Yeah, I like the way you referred to it before is the baseline strat.
Yep. Theoretically, you think that, well, you want to kill all the enemies? This is what you do. Any strategy that you come up with for a chapter must be faster than this strat. So we investigate the mines and gasp, there's salt in here! That's very important! And now that leads into the big dilemma in chapter 17. How are we going to use this salt to shape the future of the continent of Norzelia? Roland, Frederica, and Benedict all want to do different things, and all of them, certain party, either Frederica, Roland, or Benedict, cannot agree with another one under any circumstances, and this is going to be the split between which ending you go for. And in this case, we are going to be going with Roland's ending, also known as the utility ending, as it is the fastest. The reason that is the fastest is because the other endings have 2 kill all enemies map and 1 kill boss map. But Roland's ending replaces one of those kill boss maps, one of those kill all enemies maps with a kill boss map.
This is where we permanently lose Frederica as well.
Yep, she just cannot agree with that because Roland's ending involves siding with Hyzant, which, as you remember, they have been oppressing the Roselle, which are Frederica's people, and, well, we end up selling them out, and, well, that's just wrong, man. So I can't really blame her, to be honest.
We chose our best friend over our wife, but to be fair, we just met her 50 minutes ago.
Yeah. The things we do for time saves.
I also failed the boss of chapter 17, which is a save menu, which requires you to input the opposite way that you've been inputting for the entire game.
Yep, it's something that you have to very consciously be aware of as you face it. You can't just mash through it like you usually would.
Yeah, the route notes save menu boss.
Yep.
And there's Frederica. Bye, Frederica. Another reason that Roland is our main damage dealer now. So now that we have allied ourselves with Hyzant, we are going to be marching on to Esfrost, the ones who actually started this whole war in the first place, and take revenge on them for invading Glenbrook once and for all. So the first obstacle in our way is going to be getting past Twins Gate, a massive barrier that is being watched over by Sycris, the constable. And this is the reason that this route is faster, because this is the kill boss map that on other routes would be a kill all enemies map.
Yeah, in the cutscenes they're telling you it's kind of noteworthy that Sycris is here and not Lord Svarog, who is supposed to be in charge of Twins Gate. We don't know where he is. It's probably not important. He probably won't show up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No need to worry about him at all. So while on other routes you would have to be slowly dealing with a massive amount of enemies, trying to kill them all at once using that slow Quahog and Izana combo, on this route we can just warp Roland right up there and one round the boss using 4 dragons. Nice and simple. So now that we have pushed through Twins Gate, we are now going to be invading the capital of Esfrost. We are going to be facing off against Gusadolf, the one who ordered the invasion on Glenbrook in the first place, and also the one who actually killed Roland's family, his father, the king, and the crown prince. So we'll be taking on our revenge there. Now, this map, Chapter 19, is really slow, really massive, and it's a massive pain to deal with. It's really big, so just reaching the enemies to kill them is a pain. But also, it's completely covered in snow and ice terrain, and that gives a movement penalty to all of your units except for the flying units, of which there are only 2 of, and they're not really good damage dealers, so that wouldn't really help out anyway. So once again, we'll be using the Kohog and Izana combo. But even then, chipping down all of the enemies is difficult to do because of how far away they are. So instead, in order to deal with that, we have to have Anna use her mobility ability called Surmount to give herself 2 extra movement, as you can see right there on Pix's stream. And that lets her just get a little bit closer to the group of enemies up there, which Benedict will help her do with In Tandem and with the Now ability. So she's going to chip down that group of enemies right there with 2 Firestones, taking advantage of her Act Twice ability once again. And this is where Milo's going to be taking advantage of that movement bangle that we gave her back in Chapter 15. That allows her to reach those 2 enemies with a Firestone. Previously, before we had done that re-equip, she was only able to reach 1 enemy, and we had to take a bit of extra time to finish off that mage in the back. And next up, you can see why this map is such a pain, because we have to sit through all of these enemy turns waiting for our next unit, Archibald, to use Inescapable Arrow to one-shot that enemy healer right there, which allows us to completely skip his turn, which means that's 1 less animation that we have to sit through. And now Kohog and Izana are able to start their Rite of Thunderstorms combo.
Yeah, it also helps because the camera kind of pans slowly between them, and the camera would be moving very slowly one way, then back the opposite way, so it cuts some of that out for us. We also only choose to deploy 8 units here because, yeah, more units could give us more damage, but it also results in more dead turns that we have to sit through.
Yep. And now another new micro optimization that we did right there is give Anna the Amulet of Immunity. This is an item that gives you immunity to status effects and debuffs. It's usually a pretty niche item that isn't really used often, even in casual play, but it allows us to skip a few animations in case she got paralyzed. And also, there are some speed debuffs there that would potentially slow her down, and we don't want to have to deal with that. Now, while we were able to chip down most of the enemies on the map, there's still the boss that we weren't able to reach, so we're going to have to sit through some more animations and wait for Anna's turn to come back to finish him off.
Time will be coming up very, very shortly.
Yeah, I accidentally mashed through Benedict's turn.
Oh, Pix.
I know.
Yeah, we really need Benedict to give Anna that 2 full turn buff right there in order to give Anna enough damage to finish off Gustadolf, as he is pretty bulky, and we can only really reach him with these Firestones, which, while they do have the elemental weakness, we do need all 4 of them in order to finish him off. But unfortunately, Benedict ends up positioning Anna slightly off because Anna has a passive ability called Back Attack Damage Up, and it does work with the elemental stones, and you kind of need that in order to get the extra damage to finish him off. Now we move into the final chapter of the game. We have defeated Gustadolf, but turns out Svarog, who was actually there all along, he's here, and he is not happy that you are invading his beloved Esfrost, and he is not going down without a fight.
Time for me.
Yep, there's time for Shape. They're a little ahead due to some, as the stream is a little bit behind. But this is one last kill boss map, and all we have to do is use Kohog to swap spaces with Svarog right there. We're going to one last time use our fleet-footed and battle cry buffs to get the firepower and mobility to reach the boss. And just like that, all that needs to happen is for Roland to hit this unfortunately imperfect accuracy attack and hopefully land that hit and one round Svarog to complete the game. And Shay successfully connects the hit. while it is pretty high, it's like a 96% chance. Roland misses that attack a lot more often than you might think. And Roland connects for picks 2, and that's going to be time for both of them. So congratulations to Shay for winning the race, and congratulations to both of our runners.
Yeah, GG's. Hope everyone enjoyed getting to see Triangle Strategy. Thank you for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. The route just got under 1 hour within the last 24 hours, thanks to some new discoveries, and we're continuing to learn and reroute. So if you are interested, feel free to stop by my chat. I have a command !TS Discord, and you can join the Discord for Triangle Strategy. You can come talk with us about routing and the game. And thanks to OSC and Speed Gaming for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Fun race.
We actually just very recently got the speedrun to be sub 1 hour, and that's for this route. We were also able to get it for another route, and we're hopefully going to be able to bring a third route down to sub 1 hour and get the true ending, the golden route, the longest one, pretty close there as well.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks everyone for watching.